History, Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew, the origin of a people, Part 1. Before names were blurred by centuries, before books were written and empires rose and fell, there were only men walking through ancient deserts, following promises they could not see. At that time, there was no Hebrew as a formal identity, nor Israelite as a nation, nor Jew as a people recognized among the kingdoms of the earth. There were only families, clans, and a living memory passed down from father to son, like a flame that could not be extinguished. And it all begins with a man named Abraham. He lived in the land of Ur of the Chaldeans, a region marked by ancient cities, temples, and stone gods. But something different happened to him. According to tradition, a voice called him out of that land, telling him that he should leave his home, his relatives, and everything he knew, to journey to an unknown place. Abram left. And at that moment, without him knowing it, began the story of a name that would later be remembered as Hebrews. The term Hebrew does not emerge as a title of immediate glory. It appears as a form of external identification used by neighboring peoples to refer to this group of travelers, nomads, and descendants of Abraham. They were people who traversed lands, who did not belong to a single city, nor to a single kingdom. They were those who cross over, those who come from beyond, those who walk. Abraham received a promise. His descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. But at that moment, he had no children, no land, no kingdom. Only the promise. Time passed, and Abram became Abraham. His life was marked by journeys, covenants, and trials. And his family grew, but it was not yet a nation. It was a lineage. From this lineage came Isaac and later Jacob, and it is here that the story begins to change direction. According to tradition, Jacob wrestled with the mystery all night long. Some say an angel, others say God. At dawn, he received a new name, Israel. This name was not merely a change of personal identity. It was the harbinger of something greater. Starting with Jacob, his descendants began to be called children of Israel. And here a new term is born, Israelites. But it was not yet a formed nation. There were 12 sons, 12 tribes, scattered across stories of jealousy, famine, migration, and survival. Among them was Joseph, sold by his own brothers and taken to Egypt, where his story intertwines with the destiny of an empire. What was once just a Hebrew family was now beginning to transform into something bigger, a people who would grow up in foreign lands. In Egypt, they ceased to be merely travelers. They became numerous. So numerous that they came to be seen as a threat. And so, what began as a promise turned into slavery. But we are not yet at the point of liberation. We haven't reached the Exodus yet. We haven't gotten to Moses yet. For now, it's important to understand one fundamental thing. Hebrews is the name of the origin and the crossing. Israelites is the name given to the organized descendants of Jacob. And Jews haven't appeared in history yet. Because the name Jew emerged much later, when kingdoms divided, when cities fell, and when a tribe became a symbol of survival. But that will be revealed later. For now, the children of Israel are in Egypt. They are growing in number, but losing their freedom. And a new phase of history is about to begin. A phase that will change everything. History, Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew, the origin of a people, Part 2. Egypt had become a place of abundance and also of pain for the children of Israel. What began as hospitality in the days of Joseph had transformed, generations later, into servitude. A new Pharaoh ascended the throne, and he did not know the story of Joseph. To him, those descendants of the Hebrews were merely a people too numerous, too large, too dangerous. And so the oppression began. The children of Israel were subjected to forced labor. They built cities, carried stones, and molded bricks under the scorching sun of the Egyptian desert. Their bodies were bound, but their memory still held something ancient, the promise made to Abraham. But suffering did not diminish their numbers. On the contrary, the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. Then came the cruel order: every male child born among the Hebrews was to be killed at birth. It was in this scenario of decreed death that a new name would be prepared in history, a name that would change the destiny of the people. In the midst of this decree, A boy was born. His mother hid him for 3 months. When she could no longer hide him, she placed him in a reed basket and left him among the reeds of the Nile River, entrusting his fate to the waters and to mystery. The boy was found by Pharaoh's daughter. And, ironically, the one who would be raised within the oppressor's house would grow up with the destiny of liberating the oppressed. His name was Moses. But before becoming a liberator, Moses was exiled. After trying to defend his people and killing an Egyptian, he fled to the desert. There, he spent years far from his origins, far from his people, far from the palace. He became a shepherd, living in silence, as if his story had ended before it began. But the story of the Hebrews never ends in silence. One day in the desert, Moses saw something unusual, a burning bush that was not consumed. As he approached, he heard a voice. That voice called him by name. And at that moment, something changed not only in Moses' life, but in the identity of an entire people. The voice told him that he should return to Egypt and bring the children of Israel out of slavery. Moses hesitated. He didn't see himself as a leader. He didn't see himself as a savior. He didn't see himself as someone capable of confronting Pharaoh. But the mission did not depend on his self-image. It depended on the old promise. When Moses returned to Egypt, he did not return alone. His brother Aaron accompanied him. Together, they went to Pharaoh and delivered a simple yet impossible message: "Let my people go." The Pharaoh refused. And then came the plagues. Water turned into blood. Frogs invading the land. Darkness covering Egypt. And finally, the last and most devastating: the death of the firstborn. It was this last plague that finally broke the Pharaoh's resistance. The children of Israel were freed. But freedom was not a simple path. They left Egypt in haste, taking with them only the essentials. And ahead of them was no easy road. There was the desert. The same desert that had shaped Moses would now shape an entire nation. Pharaoh changed his mind and pursued the people. Trapped between the Egyptian army and the sea, the children of Israel saw the impossible before them. But in the history of these people, the impossible was never the end. The sea parted, and they crossed over. From that moment on, they ceased to be merely a family of scattered Hebrews. They ceased to be simply descendants of Israel living under slavery. They became a nation in formation. The name Israelites was now gaining strength not only as a lineage, but as the collective identity of a people who had been liberated. In the desert, they received laws, direction, and a covenant. They were taught to live no longer as slaves, but as a separate people, guided by principles, rituals, and memories. But the desert also revealed something profound. External freedom does not easily erase the mentality of internal slavery. Many doubted, complained, and longed to return to Egypt. The past still drew them back. And it is in this process of transformation that the identity of Israelites is consolidated. It wasn't just about blood. It was about an alliance. But something was still missing. There was no land yet. There was no kingdom yet. The term Jews did not yet exist. That would come later, when the people entered the promised land, when kings arose, when internal divisions changed history. For now, they were Israelites, a people in formation, walking between promise and destiny, between desert and hope. And the crossing continued. History: Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew, the origin of a people, Part 3. The desert was behind them, but the promise had not yet been fully fulfilled. The children of Israel had left Egypt, crossed the sea, and received laws along the way. Now they were walking toward a land that, according to the ancient promise, belonged to them. But this land was not empty. Other peoples already inhabited those regions, with fortified cities, kings, and armies. The journey was not just geographical. It was also an internal transformation. As generations passed, the people who were once called Hebrews, then Israelites, began to settle in a land that would come to be known as Canaan. And there, under Joshua's leadership, battles, conquests, and agreements took place. Tribes spread throughout the territory, each with its inheritance, its land, its responsibility. But there was still no king. For a long time, the people were guided by judges, leaders raised up in times of crisis, war, and spiritual decline. It was an unstable period, marked by cycles of loyalty and downfall, victory and corruption, peace and conflict. The people had left Egypt, but Egypt still seemed to live within them. Over time, a desire arose to be like other nations, to have a visible king, a centralized government, permanent leadership. And then the people asked the prophet Samuel for a king. Despite warnings, the request was granted. And so Saul, the first king of Israel, came to be. But his reign did not bring lasting stability. After him came David. And here the story begins to change again. David not only unified tribes, he consolidated Jerusalem as a political and spiritual center. Under his rule, the kingdom gained strength, identity, and structure. He expanded borders, organized the government, and established a dynasty. It was during this period that one of the tribes gained special prominence, the tribe of Judah. From her would come the royal lineage of David. And here begins an important point in history. The term Jew starts to form from Judah. But it wasn't a complete separation yet. The people were still called Israel. There was still unity. David's son, Solomon, inherited a powerful kingdom. His era was marked by wealth, wisdom, and the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, a central symbol of the people's faith and identity. But it was also during his reign that internal tensions began. Heavy taxes, inequality, and divisions between tribes created deep rifts. After his death, the kingdom was divided. This division was one of the most decisive moments in all of history. On one side, the northern kingdom, which retained the name Israel, was made up of 10 tribes. On the other side, the southern kingdom, formed mainly by the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. And it is here that the term Jew begins to take on a clearer form. The inhabitants of the kingdom of Judah came to be called Jews, not only as descendants of a tribe, but as an identity linked to the territory, culture, and centrality of Jerusalem. While the northern kingdom retained the name Israel, the southern kingdom preserved the temple, the lineage of David, and an identity that was beginning to solidify in a different way. Over time, the northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians. Its tribes were scattered, mixed together, and lost to history. The kingdom of Judah remained. And that is why, historically, the term Jew becomes even stronger after the Babylonian exile. When the kingdom of Judah was conquered by Babylon, many were taken captive. The temple was destroyed. The city of Jerusalem fell. But even in exile, identity did not disappear. On the contrary, it grew stronger. Jew ceased to be merely an inhabitant of Judah. It became a symbol of resistance, memory, and faith preserved far from the homeland. During their exile, they maintained their traditions, laws, stories, and hope of returning. And when they finally returned, they rebuilt Jerusalem and the temple. But the world was no longer the same. Empires shifted, languages changed, cultures transformed, and the people were now increasingly known as Jews. Meanwhile, the old terms still coexisted. Hebrew continued to be used to refer to ancestral origin. Israelite was still used to refer to the people connected to Jacob and the tribes. But Jew became the predominant term in much of the ancient world to identify this specific people. And so, 3 names came to exist for the same story, but at different times. Hebrews, the origin of the journey and the promise. Israelites, the people formed from Jacob and the nation in the desert. Jews, the people who survived division, exile, and reconstruction. But the story isn't over yet, because the identity of this people would continue to transcend empires, dispersals, and returns. And there would be even more transformations to come. History, Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew, the origin of a people, Part 4, Final. Centuries have passed, and the world around the people has changed many times. Empires rose and fell like waves across the earth: Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. Each left its mark, but none managed to completely erase the identity of those who were once called Hebrews, then Israelites, and finally known as Jews. The history of this people was not marked by remaining in one place, but by the ability to survive amidst change. After returning from the Babylonian exile, the people of Judah rebuilt Jerusalem and the temple. Religious life was reorganized, the teachings were preserved, and the memory of the ancient promises remained alive. But political independence would not last. Over time, new forms of domination emerged. The land once again came under the rule of foreign empires. Even so, the people's identity did not disappear. It adapted, resisted, and was passed down from generation to generation. During this period, the term Jew became even more established. He represented not just one tribe, nor just one ancient kingdom. He came to represent an entire people, scattered yet united by faith, tradition, and memory. Meanwhile, the term Israel also remained alive, especially in sacred traditions and in the memory of the 12 tribes. And Hebrew, the oldest of the three names, remained as a reference to the earliest origins, to that time when it all began with a promise made to a man who left his land without knowing where he was going. 3 names, 3 layers of the same story. But as time went on, the world began to look at these people differently. They were not merely inhabitants of a small land in the east. They were a people scattered across various regions, maintaining their practices, laws, and identity even far from their original homeland. This dispersal became known as diaspora. It was during this period that the Jewish identity became even broader, crossing borders and cultures. In each place where they lived, they maintained something in common: the memory of their origin. The memory of Abraham, the Hebrew who left without knowing where he was going. The memory of Jacob, who became Israel and gave his name to a nation. The memory of a people who crossed the desert, received laws, built a kingdom, and faced divisions and exiles. But above all, the memory of a people who have not disappeared, even when their land was taken, even when his temple was destroyed, even when they were scattered among the nations. They stayed. Over the centuries, scholars, kings, and foreign peoples began to use the 3 terms interchangeably, often without understanding their deep historical origins. Hebrew became associated with antiquity. Israeli refers to the ancient tribal and national formation. Jew refers to the most recent and surviving identity after the exile. But to understand it properly, it's necessary to go back to the beginning. Hebrew is not just a name, it is the origin of a journey. An Israelite is not merely an inhabitant, it is the formation of a people based on a renewed promise. Being Jewish is not just an ancient nationality, it is the survival of an identity throughout history. So, what seems confusing to many is actually a continuous timeline. The same story seen in different phases. One people living under different names. A single thread running through the centuries. And when you look at all of this closely, you realize that these are not 3 different peoples, but 3 moments in a single historical journey. The beginning, the formation, and the survival. It all begins with Abraham. Consolidation with Israel. Staying with Judah. And that is why these names continue to be studied to this day. Because they don't just represent the past. They represent identity, memory, and continuity. And so this story ends, not as a definitive end, but as an understanding of a path that spans millennia. A journey that began with a promise in the desert and still echoes through time.